Hey, everybody, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 3 of Lessons from Terrible Students. As always, we are the Terrible Students. My name is Jeremy. That's Sarah. Sarah, say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
So today we're going to be talking about some leadership hot takes. So these are things that hopefully you already consider as kind of controversial topics. If not, I guess you'll know after today that these are some relatively controversial topics. So as always, before we get into some of the topics of today's episode, this episode is brought to you by Lumius. At Lumius, we are your partner in learning. Okay, so to give a little bit more explanation about what we mean by leadership hot take, we're going to start by one that is kind of self-explanatory, and that a pizza party is no longer good motivation for your team. So if you're sitting in a leadership meeting and you're thinking, man, my team has been doing really good lately, I want to do something for them to show them how appreciative I am, I'm going to order some pizzas for them. I want you to stop and think of something else. That is no longer an acceptable thing to do for your team. It may very well be coming from a good spot inside of you. And I appreciate that you're thinking that you do need to do something for your team, because that is the train of thought that you need to have. But a pizza party is not it.
It's not. No, it's really not. Now, if you want to do that in addition to something, whether that's some sort of monetary little bonus, gift cards, taking extra time on break or lunch, depending on what your industry is, something like that, in addition to, I think it's acceptable, but we got to do better.
Pizza party. Yeah. Well, and as I've worked in corporate America longer and longer, I've started to kind of see behind the scenes on some of these, and just to kind of, for those that don't know, a lot of times what it is there's a budget set aside for like employee morale, and that's X amount of dollars for a calendar year or a budget year. And, that's how much these leaders have to spend on their entire team.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's, okay, how much can I get out of this amount of money? And I don't just want to cut everybody a check, because I don't necessarily have enough in my budget for that to really be impactful. Like if I did that across all of my people, that may be only cutting everybody like a $50 check, which is not going to do a whole lot, right? So it's, how can I get the most out of this money? And I could see where people lean towards pizza, because you can feed a lot of people for not a lot of money, but because I can see that, your people can see that too. So they see that it's kind of the least amount of effort. And when it comes to motivating your team, you have to show that you're willing to put that effort in. So just calling the local, Domino's, Pizza Hut, Papa John's, whatever pizza place is closest to your,
it's not even good pizza.
business.
You're going cheap. And I have to say though that, like, I think anybody would tell you they'd even rather take $50 extra on their check, or $50 in gift cards than a pizza party. I think,
that actually brings us to our second hot take, and this one I've had conversations, kind of, I'll say around the dinner table, but that's not quite how it is. But I've had conversations with friends of mine and family members, that the hot take being that money is the best motivator. So if you're trying to motivate your team, the best motivator is more money. So, and I know that's kind of, some people think of it as crass. Some people think of it as kind of the worst thing you can do is just give somebody cash. And maybe it's cultural. Maybe it's like, we don't just want to cut somebody a check or whatever, but I don't know. For me, I have kind of always believed that, I'm at this job. Yes, I enjoy doing what I'm doing, and yes, I feel like I have a reason for doing the job that I like doing, but I'm here also to get paid. I'm here to pay my bills. I'm here
Exactly.
to make sure that I can provide for my family. So anytime that I can get more of that, like anytime that I can get something on top of that, that's great for me. Like call it a bonus, call it whatever you want to call it. Um, I find that a pretty good motivator.
I think a lot of people would agree that money is a good motivator. And just really quick, before we, speaking of money and the pizza party topic, I just wanted to say this. If you are a leader and you work for an organization and they are being super duper cheap on your motivational budget, that's your job to fight for it for your people
Mm,
and ask for more, you know? So that's that's what good leaders do. They go to bat for their people, and they know the value of their folks, and that is your job to make sure that the powers that be also know how amazing your teams are. So just
yeah,
just
and
a
I would
thought
think
there.
that's a good culture indicator of your company, right?
Yep,
If you have a first of all, if you have a like person motivator budget,
yep,
that's a pretty good indicator that just having one is a good indicator that your company is at least thinking about it. But if your company is encouraging you to spend that money, that's something else. So that I've talked to a few leaders that they've been told like if there's any money that we want you to spend or that we even want you to go over budget on, it's this money. Like it's this
right.
people motivator money. We don't want you to have any of this money left. And you know, it's the I always call it budget math because anybody that's ever had to manage a budget knows you want to hit zero exactly at the end of that year, right? You never want to have money left over in your budget.
Right. You want
Like
to
that's the
spend it.
worst thing you can do is have money left over. But you always want to have an excuse as to if you went over budget. But if there's ever any budget that is easily explainable why you went over, it's probably that people motivator budget, right? Because it's, hey, I
Yeah.
was trying to make sure that my folks that did a great job this year were properly motivated and that we made sure that they knew that we appreciate them. So,
Yeah. And we're living in a time where, and we've talked about this, like, the Gen Zs, millennials,
mm,
we're in this space where people want to be valued and they want to be appreciated, and they are proactively looking for companies that are people first organizations. And
it's true.
so that is if you want to attract top talent, you need to put your people first. And this is something so small, right? Um I come from a contact center background, right? And if you've ever worked customer service, if you've ever worked in a contact center, whether that was for a BPO or a third party provider, or if you're working directly for a company, like, pizza parties are just so common. And um just, there's money to be spent. Like, companies got to stop being so cheap, right? Put your people first.
Yeah.
And if
Let me
money
tell you
is
an
is
alternative
the
that
motivator, do it.
I, as I was doing some research for this episode, I found an alternative that I was reading about. So this company had a food truck lunch. So they contracted a whole bunch of food trucks and they came out. And just that, I'm thinking, oh, that's a good idea. But what they also did was they talked to the food trucks and they said, okay, here's what we want you to do. We want you to have a limited menu. And then they printed off coupons and then gave their employees coupons for free lunch. So they would
Awesome.
essentially, on their desk when they came in, the employee already had a coupon for these food trucks and they
Yep.
got free lunch. Like it's essentially the same thing, but the company paid the food truck and said, okay, we don't want you to come out like we know that you're going to have all of this stuff, right? But limit your menu to these things. Tell us how much it's going to cost you, and then we'll pay you X amount of dollars per these coupons when you turn it in. So you're still making your money. We're making sure our people have, they're getting their motivation in, and they had a choice of what they wanted to buy. So it's not just pizza. It was, you could have chicken wings, you could have, there was
Yeah.
a vegetarian option, there was a vegan option, there was dessert options, it was all this stuff. And it ended up being an event at lunchtime instead of going into a random conference room at the end of the hall, grabbing a slice of pizza and sitting back at your desk. Like,
Exactly. And that's what happens, right? Is like, yeah, okay, you get the pizza party, but then you're getting your food and going right back to your desk. You're not really even enjoying it, right?
right.
It's like, but I like that idea. And I've worked for companies that have done just that actually. And it was great. And that gives people, it's such a minor difference, but it means a ton. You're giving people choices and options. And yeah, it's just you thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
And
Well, it means they thought about it. They took a
yeah.
little bit longer. They developed an event rather than taking the easy way out of just making a phone call, right? And I think that may be a lot of what it is just putting in the effort to make it look like that you created an event rather than just doing something that's easy from the employee perspective. And that's a lot of what I wanted to do with this episode is provide our perspective, the employee perspective, to the leaders that may be out there listening. This is kind of what I wanted to do with this episode, was give our raw, unvarnished opinion on some of these, because if a leader were to ask their team, hey, what did you think about that pizza party we threw? You're not going to get an honest answer. You're going to get, oh yeah, it was fine. It was okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
It was great. Thanks for doing that. Why they're thinking, really, that's all you could do? Because that's, you're their leader and this is their job. This is the way they
don't want
pay
to
their bill.
appear.
You're not going to get an honest answer.
Nobody wants to appear ungrateful either.
It's true.
Yeah.
Because it's still something, and they understand that you could have done nothing, but you at least did something. We're here to tell you that that's not very far above nothing. Throwing a pizza party is not that much farther above nothing.
No.
So that's kind of our first and second hot take. The second one being that, money is the best motivator. And again, there's different views on that, and I'm sure there's science to back up kind of both sides of that. But to me, I think that's a true statement. If it's in the budget and you have it there, give them the money. Like that's what we're working for. Everybody is here working to pay their bills and to, support their family. So I do believe that maybe it's better to say money is one of the best motivators.
Right.
So, all right. So we're taking a step away from motivation. Our next leadership hot take is, as an employee, as an individual contributor, we should only be available during our working hours, during our shift. So now this excludes anybody that for some reason or another has to work an on-call shift. So doctors, or, when I was a technician, I had to run an on-call shift. So if there was an emergency, they could call me in. There's additional pay that goes along with that. There's usually a different shift that you have to work that comes with a shift differential.
Ding, 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 though. There was pay that came with that.
Yes.
Right.
So we're not talking about those things. But what we're talking about is, if I get a set rate per hour to work 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with a 30-minute to an hour lunch in there, and there's a reason that I'm specifying that lunch break in there. If I have a set shift, I should not be responsible for any communication outside of those hours. So if I respond outside of those hours, that should be considered above and beyond what my responsibilities are as that employee. So if I'm hired on this shift, it should not be expected of me to read emails outside of those hours, to respond to emails outside of those hours, to respond to phone calls text messages, or anything else outside of those specific hours, including that lunchtime, because that
Right.
lunchtime is not billed hours. It is, you're not getting paid for lunch because it's technically a 9-hour day, but you're only getting paid for 8. So there's a reason that that hour lunch is built in there, right? So that's, and I am notorious about not following this rule myself.
You
There's an
know,
argument to be said about salary being like the
yeah,
expectation is different for salary, right?
I
Um,
think if your salary reflects checking your email on the weekends, then okay. But that is also a discussion that needs to be had, in my opinion, when you take a job, right? So, and also there are going to be one-off situations. For instance, I'm a project manager and we have deadlines, and our clients are paying us to meet a deadline, and sometimes that does require me to have to work on weekends
right.
and right after hours. But I knew that taking this job, and I made sure when negotiating my salary that I was comfortable knowing I have to do that sometimes, right? And
You are
also
absolutely right. Yes.
it's different too when you're a salaried employee, because there's also going to be instances where um I'm not tied to a phone or a desk for 8 hours a day like folks in a contact center, right? If I need to leave, you and I, Jeremy, we've got kids, if we need to go pick them up from school, we can go do
Yep.
that, right? And if that means if I, missed an hour and a half of work today because of a doctor's appointment, I have no problems um, doing a little bit of work outside of
Yeah.
normal
You
working
make
hours.
that time up. You're gonna work later that day. You're gonna put in some time,
Right.
Saturday, Sunday to make that time up. You're right. There is a difference when it comes to salary, but I think you touched
And it's a
on
balance.
kind of what I wanted to get into with this hot take a little bit when you talked about kind of call centers and what I think of as continuous work. So work that never
Right.
stops. So
Yeah.
somebody, and we'll use call center
It's a
as
good
kind of the example, right? So I clock in for my shift, and to put a finer point on it, I have to be in my seat ready to go at the beginning of shift. So I'm already doing stuff prior to the beginning of my shift. So in my opinion, I'm already working and not getting paid for it before I'm clocking in. Because I have to get there. I have to get everything situated. I've got to get logged into my systems. I got to be ready to go because I have to be on my first call at the start of my shift. I can't do all of that prior to clocking in. Like I have to
Right.
do all of that and be ready for my first call at the start of my shift. So in in my kind of interpretation to it, I'm already doing things that I'm not getting paid for outside of what I would normally do, right? So those kind of continuous jobs, there's always going to be people calling in before I log in and after I log out. It's never going to stop. So me being there or not being there, yes, it may cause some hardship one way or the other on the other people working there, but me as the individual contributor, and this sounds harsh, but that's not my job to figure out how to alleviate that hardship.
Yeah.
So that's in my opinion, as the individual contributor, that's on the leadership to figure out how to work around that. And if that means putting more bodies in there, put more bodies in there. If that means figuring out different, ways to handle the traffic, then figure out different ways to handle the traffic. But I should not be expected in my off time to do additional work with no additional compensation.
Yep. No,
So
it's not
that's,
okay. It's not okay to ask people to do that.
yeah, and I think that's what, and a lot of times you'll see an expectation of people to be kind of always on, like hey, I
Yep.
sent you an email yesterday. Did you check it? Like, no, man, you sent me that email at like 8:30 at night and it is now 7:30 in the morning. No, I didn't check it. Like, I'm not working. So no, I haven't read it yet, dude. Um, so I think and I think that changes. And like I said earlier, I'm really bad about this because I've got my email on my phone. I've got our chat client on my phone.
So do
But again,
I.
I'm salary and these things pop up. So I'm kind of always there and ready because of what my job entails, because a lot of our job is reactionary. Like when our client is done with the review and it comes back, okay, now it's hot and heavy and we need to get it done because we got to hit a deadline. Um, so that's kind of the difference. But even when I was a technician, again, I always had it on my phone, but it did affect my work life balance a little bit because I always felt like I was on, even when I wasn't.
Right. Yeah. Been there, done that.
So, and that kind of leads into our next one. So when you have a promotion available, so let's say we're going to say a lead job, right? So you have a team that you lead, and there's a position kind of in between individual contributor and your spot. So you're the supervisor, you've got your team underneath you, and there's now, we'll say, a lead individual contributor spot. So the question or the hot take is, should the person that you're hiring for that spot already be doing that job before you give it to them? Should you already expect them to know how to do that job before you give them the job?
I think there's going to be a lot of different ideas about this. You're going to have a 50-50 split. And I think that's because for so long, that's been the expectation, right? Like, can you prove to me that you can do the job? Okay, that's fair. However, there are other ways to show that you have skills that translate into the requirements of this job that you are trying to get. And I think it's crazy that we make people do this job sometimes for a year, sometimes
Right.
even longer, and not get paid for it, only to be have an expectation that's not even guaranteed. I don't know that by going above and beyond and doing this job that is above my pay grade is even going to, guarantee I'm going to get the job. And that's
Right.
not fair. And we've done that to people for so long. And there are other ways to do it. If I wanted to, give my employee an opportunity, I would say, hey, these are the skills that are required for this next step. How can you show me you're capable of doing these things without being in that role yet? And then that kind of puts it back on the person too, gives them, that employee, an opportunity to come up with ideas. That shows a capability right there. Like, can you identify these skills?
Right.
Um, and yeah, that's going to be an expectation and a behavior that's really hard to change, in my opinion, in corporate America, because it's just been an expectation
Yeah. I
for
mean,
so
it's
long.
been, and
And not
there's a
even,
couple of, you're right. There's a couple of terms that I always cringe when I hear, right? So if I go into an interview and they're like, well, we want somebody that can hit the ground running. Okay. So that means you have no training for me when I start this. I always look at it from, this is a learning and development podcast, right? So that's always what I think of when I hear these things. It's okay. Any position, you really have to think about, okay, what am I willing to take the time to train this person on? So the dirty little secret for recruiting, right, is when you list all of the quote unquote necessary requirements for a position, most of the time they know that their candidate will not have all of those bullet points that they're asking for. Most of the time, the recruiter doesn't even understand all of those bullet points that are
Fair.
on that. They just go to the hiring manager and say, "Hey, give me a list," and they copy and paste it over to the job
100%.
posting. So, there's been memes of, "Hey, we want 5 years of this software that's only been out for 2.5 years." So
Yeah.
there's, this is nothing new. That, if the rule of thumb is, if you have, half to 3/4 of the skills on the job posting,
Mm,
apply for it. Like you're probably still going to be in the running, and you may surprise yourself how far you get in that job posting. But I think from the leadership perspective, what you really have to think of is, okay, what skills are we okay training this new employee on, and what skills are we not okay training them on? Like, you're almost always, if it's a new employee coming in from outside the company, you're always going to have to train them on policies, procedures, and systems. Even if it's a system they've used before, they've probably not used it exactly the way your company's using it. So a new employee is almost always going to have to be trained on policies, procedures, systems when they're brought in, whereas an existing employee is not going to have to be trained on those things. So
yeah.
the question is just, where do we want to expend those training resources, right?
Right.
Because you're right. It's not fair to expect somebody to do this job and not compensate them for the work that they're doing. What's not fair is to go, okay, we're going to try you out on a trial basis. And what I mean by that is, we're going to expect you to already do the job that you're doing, in addition to this other job that we're not paying you to do.
Yep.
And then at the end of 6 months, when this position becomes available, we're going to give it to you. And I'm going to tell you, don't do that. Like, if a company comes to you and says that, I've never heard of that working out. Maybe it does.
I mean,
Maybe I just have not been a party to that working out positively for somebody. But if they have you for 6 months doing both jobs for less money, from a pure capitalist point of view, why would they pay you more money?
right. 100%. That, and I have sadly seen leadership take advantage of people, like, on purpose in that way, right?
Yeah.
And acknowledge, why am I going to pay somebody more to do this job when they're already doing it? Or how long can I stretch this out until, we really piss them off? And then either they threaten to leave, and that's another, conversation, but, squeezing what you can out of somebody before you give them the raise or the promotion that they were looking for, until they go find it somewhere else. And then you're offering them the job you should have offered them months
Right.
ago.
Because as people, we like security, right? So
Right.
they,
Yep.
they dangle the reward in front of us, right? And we're like, oh, all I have to do is fulfill my end of this bargain, and I'm trusting that they will fulfill their end of the bargain, because if it was me, I would.
Right.
Well,
Right.
they're not you.
No. And you're replaceable in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So
And that does kind of seem like a cynical point of view. And again, maybe somewhere out there, there's company that they offer these things and it's done right. What I would say is, get it in writing.
yes. Always get it in writing, 100%. Yeah. And if you're going to agree to do something like that, all right, let's say you are very passionate about a job and you're willing to suck it up for a little while and do the work knowing you're not getting paid for it. Get it in writing, talk to your leader, say, what are the clear expectations? Once I do this, this, and this, that I will get this promotion. Like, get it as clear as possible. But I'm to your
And
point,
it may
Jeremy.
not even be, and the thing about it is, it may not even be your immediate leader that's
Right.
standing in the way of that promotion, because a lot of times there's four, five, six people that have to sign off
Yeah.
on, if it's a new position, on the creation of a new position, if it's backfilling,
Yeah.
on, you have to interview and go through this, and there may be HR policies that say they have to interview X amount of people, and you could do all of this work, and then they interview three people and somebody else just blows the interview out of the water, and now you've done all of this stuff and you don't even get the job.
Yep.
So it may not even be that it's your immediate supervisor. It may be that, three people up has said, okay, well, yeah, we said 6 months ago that we could have this position, but now the new year has come, the budget's changed, and we've got to slash the budget. So this position's not there anymore. So it's
Right.
a lot of things can change in the time that you're doing all of that additional work.
Yep. Yep. You're right. Don't do it, folks.
Okay. So this is something that is kind of, I could see either side of this issue. So as a leader, you should be more proactive in offering help than reactive in helping your team. So what I mean by that is, if you have an employee that you see is struggling with a project, or you see is struggling with a particular function of their job, you should be first offering help and not waiting on them to ask you for help. So
Yeah, or I think for me is sometimes it feels like leaders are checking a box by saying, what can I do to help? Because it's the right thing to do, right? But sometimes when you have somebody, when you have an employee, maybe they're new at their job, and or they are just, their plate is overflowing, they've got it's just full, you see them, they're working hard. Absolutely ask the question. And this is obviously my opinion, right? And some of this is based off personal experience too, is ask the question, see if there's anything specific that you can help with. And when they say, yes, you could help with this, don't be surprised, A, that they asked you for the help. B, don't be selective over what you're going to help with, right? Like, I'm offering you help, but then I say, okay, can you do this? What's something else that I can actually help you with? Or,
give me the next thing on the list. Like, I don't really
right?
want to do that. What's your next
Yeah.
thing? It's number two.
Yeah. Sometimes your people don't even know what they need help with, especially if it's something new, or it's easy to get overwhelmed with just so many things where you're like, I don't even know right now, or sometimes your employees don't want to say that they need help. They're afraid to look like they can't handle something. Right. So it's a balance. And I think, you don't want to overstep. You don't want to step on anybody's toes by just saying like, oh, well, you're not doing this right. Cause that's different, right? Like, you're doing a bad job at this, so I'm just going to do it. That's not a good way to help either. It's a balance. And in my experience, really good, strong leaders can look at their people and say like, okay, first of all, you're doing a really, really kick-ass job at this and all of these things. But your plate is really full. Why don't you let me take this one part? Or which one of these tasks can I take off your plate and help you with? Give them options. Something that's a little bit more than this kind of like broad, what can I do to help? Like, it's helpful. You need to ask that question. But if you're constantly being told, I'm good, I don't need help, but your people are still flailing, I think it's important to know, be proactive with it. Like you're saying, Jeremy, like, just make an offer, give some options. No, that goes back to also, I think this is another one of our topics, but being able to do the job that your people are doing, right? If
Yeah.
you have an
Yeah.
expectation.
You're right. And I don't want to jump on that just yet, because you've
Right.
said a couple of things. That was 100% on point, Sarah. Like that's you made so many good points there, and I want to hit a couple of those because this has been a particular thing that I've had to learn um, throughout my learning and development career. So I would always get early in my career, I would always get, hey, what can I help with? And I would always say nothing because I
Right.
was never one to admit that I needed help. Like I viewed that as a negative. Like if I say I need help with something, that means I can't handle what has been assigned to me. And coming from, a very volume focused job, like your point of pride was how much you could get done. Excuse me.
Yeah. Yep.
So, when it was, hey, what can I help you with? The answer was always nothing, I'm fine.
Yep.
But if they had phrased it like you just did, like, hey, you're doing great. I see that you've got all these things, and then had gone into specifics about, okay, how about this? I probably would have been more open to that, but that's never how it was phrased to me. So I think that's masterful how you kind of said that, because I would have accepted the help then, because then it would have been like, okay, yeah, I do need help, but this is a different way of kind of coming at it to where I don't have to admit that I had too much. So
Yep.
that's just a great way to put it. But yeah, leading into our second point of, and this is a hot take that I 100% agree with this statement. And I've had people argue with me a lot about this statement. But if you are leading a team, you should be able to, in some form or fashion, do the job of the folks on your team.
Yep.
So if you are, the leader of, a manufacturing team, you should know what each person on that team does. And if push comes to shove, you should at least be able to step in. And I'm not saying you should be as good as those people at it, because they do it day in and day out. More than likely, they're going to be better than you at it. But you should at least be passable. You
Yep.
should at least be able to do something to help the
Or
team out if push comes to shove.
or
So if you,
understand it enough
yes,
to
yes,
identify and say, okay, maybe I can't do this, but I know the exact resource that we need to either hire in addition or
yes,
contract or,
exactly. Because
look out and do a business.
how are you hiring folks to do that job if you don't understand the minutia of what it takes to do that job? And this was something that it irked me when I was like a field technician, because I had seen, supervisors that had not been in the field for 15, 20 years. And I knew that they would not be able to do the job anymore. And, I've been out of the field for 10 years now. I would not pretend to know what's going on out there anymore. It's so different now than when I was out there. I don't think I would be able to go now and turn around without some kind of reorientation and retraining.
Oh,
There's no
100%.
way.
No, no, but you understand it enough to be able to provide appropriate guidance and know, you know, at least the right people that can
Yeah.
help.
So,
Or you're
and I think,
willing to learn. You're willing to learn. How many of us, how many times have you, this is what, I love it that companies like to promote from within. Don't get me wrong. I think that's ideal, right? If you can promote from within and show your people that you appreciate the hard work and the dedication and you're willing to train them. But what I don't love is when somebody is promoted just because it's their time, right? It's, well, this person is due for a promotion, so we're going to move them into this manager role even though they have no idea
mm,
about what they're leading. They don't, their team, every single person on their team has a higher skill set than they do. That's going to cause animosity. It's going to, it's just not a good thing to do. And there's a balance there, at least be able to say, okay, this is why this person was moved into this role as your leader, because these skills translate. They're going to learn. We're going to need your help teaching them, or whatever the situation is. But
Yeah, absolutely.
it's just, it's kind of goes back to the do as I say, not as I do thing. And that's one of my pet peeves, right? Is a leader that is,
Yeah, I mean, I think the key of it is just to be willing to learn what your folks do and be open to learning that all the way through. And I think that's the key of it, really. So we're coming up on the end of our episode, so we wanted to get one more in here. So the last one, and this is one that a leadership hot take that I disagree with an asterisk, and I'll put that in there. So the key to this is that respect should come with whatever your title is. So if you're a senior director, manager, you should immediately have a level of respect because of what that title is. And while I understand that, here's what I'll say to that, and here's where I may have gotten myself into trouble a few times. I afford a certain level of respect because you have worked to get to that position, and I understand that. So I will give you that level of respect. What I will not do is keep that same level of respect if you do something to lose it.
right.
So I will afford you a higher level of respect because you have that position, but through your actions, I will hold you to the same level of respect as I would anybody else. So if you do something through your actions or through your work or through your attitude towards somebody else that causes me to lose respect for you, I don't care what your title is. So if you were to do something that affects my opinion of you, I'm still going to treat you professionally. I'm like, it's not like I'm going to yell and curse you out in the office because that's not how civilized people act, right?
Right.
But there will be a difference in how I treat somebody that I respect with a manager title and how I treat somebody that I do not respect with the manager title. So, and
Yep.
that's kind of where I fall on it. Like, and I think the people that assume they should have a certain level of respect just because they have that title, I think their behavior shows pretty
Yes.
quickly.
100%. So this is where, personally, as if I ever step into a leadership role, what I respect is servant leadership.
Mm,
That terminology, it's powerful, and in my experience, good leaders are there to serve their people and their team and guide them and be their advocates, and you just don't get that way by demanding respect because of your title, and that's it. It's like, respecting your elders because they're old. Okay. Congratulations, you've lived a long time. That took a lot. However, if you're rude and you're mean and you're disrespectful, like, that does not automatically garner you respect because you're old. And to me, that should be the same for leadership. Just because you are in a senior leadership role, that doesn't automatically mean that you deserve everyone's respect immediately. And
yep.
good leaders know that.
Yeah. And for me, a lot of it is you have a certain level of respect from me until you lose it.
Right.
But, and a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
that for me is not even, it doesn't even have anything to do with leadership. Like as a person,
As a
I
human.
respect everybody to a certain level until you give me a reason not to. So, and that's where, it becomes a different relationship, right? So,
Yeah.
and I think your actions will speak louder than your title ever will. So
Always.
leader or not, I think a lot of it is how you treat the folks that you work with. And I think that becomes even more important as you have people that you're leading and that depend on you to set the tone for your team. Like as you become a leader, it becomes even more important that you set kind of a tone of we're here to work together. It's not like I'm not, the end all be all omnipresent force in this. Like we're all working together, and I've had bosses that just expected me to go with whatever they said, no matter if it was wrong or not. And that's just not who I am. So we've butted heads a little bit. So had to add that one on here in the last little bit.
Yeah, it's a good one, and I think we are moving in a direction with, and we have a whole other episode that is dedicated to the generation gaps.
Oh yeah.
It's something that comes up a lot, and this is one of those things that is, to me, a clear indicator of a certain generation, that they are more so prone to have that type of behavior. And
stay tuned for that one. We're gathering data on the differences between the generation and how they view leadership and how they are acting in their leadership roles. So
how they lead.
We're gathering data on that right now. So we've got to gather up some data and analyze it and all that, but it should provide a pretty good episode. So, but on that, we'll say goodbye for now. Thank you everybody for listening. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next time.
Take care. Bye, everybody.